Welcome to CBS Easy.
Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever just stopped and wondered how life, well, makes more life? From the tiniest little microbe to a giant whale, everything alive has this incredible superpower. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most important chapters for your board exams. How do organisms reproduce? Let's get right into it. So let's kick things off with a question that's, all about you. Why do you have your dad's eyes but your mom's smile? You're clearly a mix of both, but you're not a perfect carbon copy of either one. That little bit of uniqueness, that mix, that's where all the magic happens. And we're about to figure out exactly how it works. The answer starts super small, deep inside ourselves, with the master molecule of life itself, DNA. You've got to think of DNA as the ultimate blueprint, or a giant cookbook for an organism. It has every single recipe needed to build you, from your hair color to how your heart beats. It's all written right there in the code of DNA. So at its absolute core, reproduction is all about making a copy of that blueprint. Before anything else can happen, a cell has to basically hit Control-C, Control-V on its entire genetic plan. This DNA copying is the first and most fundamental step. It's the real starting line for creating any new life. Okay, pens out, highlighters ready. This right here is a huge deal for your boards. Examiners absolutely love this concept, so pay close attention. We're talking a potential 3-mark question, so you'll want to lock this in. So why is this copying so important? Well, it's pretty simple, really. This is how all the information, the body design, the traits, all of it gets passed down from parent to child. It's the reason a dog has puppies and not kittens. It's what keeps the blueprint for a species going, generation after generation. It's the very foundation of heredity. But here's where it gets really cool. That copy machine isn't perfect. It makes tiny little typos sometimes, and these aren't mistakes, they're actually the secret ingredient for evolution. These tiny changes create differences, what we call variation, and it's this variation that allows a species to adapt and survive when the world changes. This is why you're not an exact clone of your parents. Okay, so we've got the basics down. Now let's check out life's solo artists, the organisms that can reproduce all by themselves, no partner needed. We call this asexual reproduction. The most straightforward way they do it is through fission. And yeah, it's pretty much what it sounds like, splitting apart. A single-celled organism just grows a bit, copies its DNA, and then splits into 2 or more new individuals. It's incredibly fast and super efficient. And here's the celebrity example, the amoeba. You can see it right here in this diagram. First, the nucleus inside starts to stretch out and divide. Then the rest of the cell just splits around it, and boom, you have 2 identical daughter cells. This is a classic example of binary fission, and you should definitely know how to draw and explain this diagram. Another really cool method is budding. Now, instead of splitting right down the middle, a little mini-me, called a bud, just starts growing right off the side of the parent at one specific spot. And look at this. Here's a hydra doing its thing. See that little growth on the side? That's not a weird bump. It's a whole new hydra just starting out. Once it's big enough and developed, it just pops off and starts its own independent life. How cool is that? Another key diagram to remember for sure. Now, plants have some amazing tricks up their sleeves. One of the coolest is vegetative propagation. This is where a whole new plant can grow from just a piece of the parent, like a stem, a root, or even a leaf. No seeds needed. And the big win here? It means the new plant can grow up and produce fruits and flowers way faster. It's a natural shortcut. And you've got to see this example. This is a bryophyllum leaf. Look at the little notches on the edge of the leaf in this picture. Tiny little buds can grow right out of them, roots and all. If that leaf just happens to fall on some damp soil, bam, you get a bunch of brand new independent plants. One leaf can literally start a whole family. All right, so we've seen the solo act. Now it's time for the duet, sexual reproduction. This is where things get really interesting because you're mixing genetic information from 2 different parents. And why bother with all the extra effort? Because it turbocharges variation, giving a species a massive advantage for surviving and adapting in the long run. In flowering plants, the flower is ground zero for all the action. They're not just there to look pretty, they're actually super sophisticated reproductive structures. As you can see here, you've got the key players, the stamen, which is the male part that makes pollen, and the pistil, the female part that holds the ovules. So, how does it all go down? It's a three-step journey. First, you have pollination, which is just getting the pollen from the male part to the female part. Second, the pollen grain grows a tiny tube down towards the ovary. And third, the grand finale, fertilization. That's when the male and female germ cells, or gametes, finally fuse together. And this diagram shows that incredible journey perfectly. Look, the pollen grain lands on the stigma, and then it's like it's on a mission, growing this pollen tube all the way down to reach the ovule, where the female gamete is just waiting. It's a microscopic race against time, all to create a new seed. Okay, let's boil this down because this comparison is a guaranteed exam question. Asexual reproduction, one parent, it's fast, and it produces identical copies or clones. Sexual reproduction, two parents, it's a bit more complex and it creates genetically unique offspring with lots of variation. That's the core difference you absolutely need to know. All right, let's bring it all back home and talk about us, humans. For us, this whole story really kicks off with puberty. That's the time in our lives when our bodies change and become mature enough to be capable of reproduction. And it's a team effort. On the left, you see the male reproductive system. Its main job is to produce and deliver sperm, which are made in the testes. On the right is the female reproductive system, which produces eggs in the ovaries. This system is also designed to protect and nourish a developing baby. The moment one sperm fuses with one egg, that's the very beginning of a new human life. Whew, we have covered so much ground today. So let's pull everything together. I'm going to give you some topper secrets and a super fast recap to make sure all of this sticks in your brain. Listen, if you want to score top marks, you've got to speak the language of biology, using these exact words like gametes instead of just sex cells or zygote for the fertilized egg shows the examiner that you really get it. So make friends with these key words. All right, you ready? 60-second recap. Let's do this. Reproduction starts with DNA copying to pass on traits. Little mistakes in the copy? That's variation, and it's essential for evolution. Asexual is the solo act, one parent. Think amoeba splitting or hydra budding. Sexual is the duet, two parents, creating tons of variation. In plants, it's all about pollination, then fertilization. In humans, a sperm from the testes meets an egg from the ovaries. You've totally got this. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into how do organisms reproduce. Remember, the goal here isn't just to memorize facts, but to really understand these incredible processes. Keep being curious, keep practicing, and you are going to do great. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for watching with us. See you next time.